also tweeted last night.
Wow.
He was trying to help me write an article too.
What do you think about
All right, you guys ready?
You should name your cat Paw Seawald.
Think about that. I might just have to name this guy Paul Seawald.
Just Seawald is a decent.
You could Paw Seawald and Paul Seawald. With a very small.
Bro, I might name this motherfucker Paw Seawald. There's our cold open.
You're
Fair enough. All right. Well, hello and welcome to episode 41 of It's Never Sunny in Seattle, a Seattle Mariners podcast. I am Evan James, joined today by Michael Ahedo and Anders Jorstad. And I guess I'm going to kick it over to Anders first because baseball is back. A new CBA has been signed and we're kicking spring training off basically right now. I wanted to ask you we talked quite a bit on the last pod about the wins we wanted for the players. And so I wanted to get your gauge of how you think this went in terms of the players getting some stuff for young players and getting some of the things they wanted in general from this negotiation.
Yeah, when was last time we talked? Was like where were we? Were we at Boob's fake number 1 or fake number 2? Oh man, I don't think we've talked since that happened where everyone thought that he was a hero because he mentioned that the two sides were like somewhat close on one specific issue and then it turned out they weren't. Yeah, I'm excited that baseball is back. I was feeling really down in the dumps after they didn't meet their second deadline, the one where they pushed games back, quote unquote, through April 14th. And then they made a deal the next day and they were like, never mind, we're gonna play on April 7th. Haha, we were just kidding about missing another week of games. Obviously I think the players could have done better, deserve better, but as has been said many places, in the interim, change like this is incremental and you're not going to get everything like this in one swing. So the Mariners, the players were not going to get, earlier free agency, earlier arbitration, better pay for the minor leaguers. That was considered far too extreme by the owners, but I think they did fairly well for what they were looking for. They got the pre-arb bonus pool, even if it wasn't the money they were looking for. They got all this done with only 12 playoff teams, for which I am super, super thankful. I think if you're a fan, baseball did pretty well on two fronts, which is that we're getting 12 playoff teams, which I think is a pretty good medium, not 14. We're getting a universal DH, which I think is great for everybody. An interesting thing that wasn't really known at first, but I think makes a ton of sense, is the fact that we are getting more interleague play. It sounds like we're going to, starting in 2023, every team will play every team, which is super exciting for me personally because I live in a National League city and will not get to see the Mariners unless they come here. But I think it's basically just getting halfway to what will ultimately be realignment. What I expect is that once baseball expands to 32 teams, is that we'll basically realign by geographical location. And I think that this is kind of a way to get there so that, you're not super thrown off when the Mariners play the Rockies every year because the Rockies will be in the Mariners division. But basically, long story short, I'm glad baseball's back.
I love it. And I wanted to state, you mentioned the universal DH. We had big news today, which is that Dan Vogelbach got a major league deal with the Pirates.
News.
So, yeah, who otherwise might be washing out of baseball has new life. So I'm always rooting for a Vogie season wherever he can play. And
Nelly's
good.
Nelly's in the backyard now, so that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's actually kind of sick to see the National League DHs. I think it's kind of dope. I'm really excited to see Nelly on the National Leagues. In the National Leagues, he's playing for the Nationals, right? Yeah.
They signed him to was it, a 2-year deal or a 1-year deal with a player option? It was something like that.
I think it was a 1.
Yeah, sounds right to me. Mikey, anything from you regarding the CBA, kind of the bump in pay for the younger minor leaguers? Anything you wanted to point out specifically that you had your eye on?
Yeah, well, first of all, I forgot that there was a universal DH until Well, I didn't like forget, but like momentarily I've forgotten in the past, however long. I I think the players did as well as they could in terms of, they set out to do a couple very specific things, and I think that they did, most of those things. Um, as I said, it was kind of about helping out the lower, however many percent, the pre-arb players. And they did that. They certainly didn't do as much as the players deserve. But I mean, it's like negotiating with a brick wall, like truly. I mean, they didn't even negotiate for how many days? 39?
Something like
Too many.
that. More than a month, essentially.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I'm excited to have baseball back, and I'm excited that I don't have to feel as bad about it as I would have otherwise. I'm surprised that we're here. I guess it's a good time to note that Durs was the correct
Yes.
one out of us three.
Did you keep track, Evan, of what our guesses were?
I don't remember specifically, other than mine was February 17th and Mikey's was in early June. So I know you won just based on those.
Well, I don't have the clip exactly, but I do remember saying that I thought baseball would be pushed back a week and that they were just going to make up those games at the end of the season. And that's pretty much exactly what happened. So not to brag or anything, but
Hey, well done.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
But yeah, I mean, I think the players did pretty well, and I think the game, nothing outrageous happened to the game. I think, I don't know about y'all, but I think I've changed my mind in terms of the shift. I think
you think limiting it is favorable?
I was anti banning the shift, and now I think it's better for the game.
I will say I no longer care, but I'm curious to hear your argument.
That's fair. I mean, the biggest thing is that I think it's had a somewhat, minimal effect on the game because of that. Because first of all, someone made this point. I think Justin Choi replied to it. But someone made the point that, like, why are teams going through all this effort? Like, it takes a lot of effort to do all this and not come away with anything. And Justin was essentially like, I think you're underestimating, like, how much what lengths they'll go to save, like, a run.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's so much effort for such a little game. And I do think, like, it affects players psychologically, like mentally. We know that, like, from the research, like it doesn't actually do that much in terms of saving runs, in terms of the actual batted balls, more so just getting in hitters' heads. So I think it'll be good in terms of, what the play looks like on the field. I don't think that it affects, like, it's not like saying, oh, like, no one can swing left-handed or some shit, like, it's not like saying, like, in football, like, no cover 2 defense. At least I don't.
Nothing's being taken away that anyone would notice really watching it,
right?
If the rule is implemented properly.
And I don't know what the enforcement of it looks like, but I think they're just banning the horseshoe shift, really,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's fine. So I don't know what it looks like in terms of, like, 6-player infield or whatever, or like a 5-man outfield. I don't know what those look like. I think those are fun and, like, silly to watch. But I am kind of glad now that they're getting rid of the horseshoe.
So to be clear, this is not taking place until 2023, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My understanding too is I actually read the rule because I was curious, because I've long kind of thought, okay, so you want to ban the shift. What does that mean practically speaking? Like what the language are they going to use to enforce this? And the short answer seems to be 4 players on the infield, 3 players in the outfield, and everybody needs to stay on their respective side of second base. And like it's a little more granular than that, but that's kind of like the gist of it. And obviously there can still be shifting in that. You can still have everybody slanted one way or the other, but it just keeps everybody in kind of a general position on the field. And I'm fine with that. Like the idea of baseball kind of being fun and like hitters being unique, or that they can hit the ball the places where the players aren't. That's kind of like the Ichiroism in the old commercial where he would hit the ball when they had like 90 people on the outfield or whatever. We've lost a little bit of that with the kind of home run heavy contact suppression approach that's been going on in the game recently. And so, yeah, I think like, if they're really going to ban the shift in this specific way that it feels like they've set up, I'm cool with that. So yeah. Interesting note. I think that the bigger bases are interesting too. And I'm curious to see how that affects a major league roster and kind of the upper echelon of talent and speed for stolen bases. It might be really minuscule in terms of, single digits for teams. It could be slightly more substantial than that. So it's something to keep an eye on. And of course, robot umps. It doesn't sound like they're actually coming next year, but they are expanding it to AAA this year. In a pretty wide capacity is my understanding. So we're going to have a lot more, data and feedback as to how umpires are reacting to that, how hitters are reacting to that, how pitchers are throwing to it, and if everybody likes it. So I think that's cool. That's a good development from my perspective. What do you guys think about any of that?
Here's what I'll say about the bases is that I think that hello cat. I just got I don't know if people are watching, but I just got 2 new cats and one won't leave me alone. You'll probably be able to hear him purring. But I think so. If you think about just like how players run, I think that this will pretty marginally help the fastest base stealers. At least if I'm thinking about this correctly, I think it'll more so help the pretty limited type base stealers, like a Mitch Haniger. I think is going to go from, he's probably around like 7 stolen bases to like maybe 15. Whereas like if someone's in the upper 20s, I think they'll only, get a couple more. Just because of the way that like you're going into the bag, like Mitch isn't the twitchiest athlete ever. Like I think it takes him a while to build up that, he's not like a heavy dude, but I think he's more of a train than like a whatever other analogy I can not create. So I think it's basically like once he's going, I think it might be a little bit harder for him to, in general, to kind of settle into the bag. I think that's the change that we're going to see. And I do think that it should help players in terms of like health a little bit, the limited amount that happens. I almost kind of wonder if it'll change how players run the bases too.
It certainly could.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
anything about that, Durs?
That's my theory.
No, I'm cool with it. I think there's very few changes that are proposed that I'm like vehemently against. Actually, one of them that I was vehemently against was the banning of the shift. But now I'm just like, honestly, it's not going to be that big of a deal. I think that it might make things better for some players. It sucks that Kyle Seager just retired because his batting average would probably have seen like a 20-point increase.
Hey, fucking stop that.
But Joey Gallo is about to be really excited, for example. There's going to be a lot of other players who are going to benefit from them. I just don't think any of them are Mariners. Like, I don't think any Mariner really has a regular shift on them right now. Or I don't know, does Jesse Winker get shifted on? I can't. I mean, I don't watch enough Reds games to know, but that's like the only thing I can think of.
I think I was looking earlier, and his shift, he was starting to get shifted a lot, and then they kind of tamed it down. I don't know how to say things ever. It went from like, I feel like 75% to like 60 because he's not that extreme. Like it's actually not that smart to shift. Like he doesn't hit the ball on the ground like that. Yeah. At least I wouldn't think so.
Yeah, the Mariners just
Yeah.
they don't have a lot of lefty bats anymore. It's very
Stop.
strange because they used to just they used to be like all lefties.
Yeah, it's been quite a turn.
But I'm cool with the rule changes. I'm cool with the league having more power. The biggest fear I have is the league making these changes to make very incremental changes to the game that they think is going to make a massive change to the game. Like, okay, so banning the shift is not going to lead to that much more action. Bigger bases is not going to lead to that much more. I guess they're experimenting with rules to incentivize keeping starting pitchers in longer in the Atlantic League. I don't know if you guys saw that, but they're basically saying if you keep your starting pitcher in for 5 innings, you can keep your DH for the whole game. But if you pull your starting pitcher before he's completed 5 innings, then you lose the DH.
Then the pitcher has to hit?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So they're trying that rule out in the Atlantic League. And I just don't think that these are big enough things to speed up the game, to, significantly increase batting average like they want to. There are things that they can do, like decreasing commercials, but they do not want to lose the revenue stream. So they're not going to do that.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Well, do we have anything else about the CBA, or do we want to break into the exciting new news?
I do just want to say real quick, for those listening, this is a very strong case for why games are longer than they used to be. This is an article from a few years ago, but if you have any curiosity, I would Google why baseball games are so damned long by Grant Brisbee, in which he analyzed a game from 1984 and a game from 2014, which were basically identical, and analyzed why one game was significantly longer than the other. And basically the conclusion is that commercials are longer. But every other measure that baseball tries to take is not going to make a significant enough dent. And that's why I hate these changes that are supposed to speed the game up, like the pitch clock and stuff like that. So anyway, that's just how I feel about that.
No, I agree. And I mean, we had a little bit of a talk about it in the Slack this week about kind of, my perspective is that I don't think that you can make baseball that much faster just in general, that a lot of these changes are going to be factors of seconds in some cases, even like a minute over the course of a game, maybe two. Okay, it's still a 3-hour experience fundamentally. Like if it's 3 hours and 15 minutes versus 3 hours and 9 minutes, I don't think that changes the calculus for most people. And you're not really, I think it's too early to say whether or not some of these changes are going to make offense more explosive or more exciting or any other kind of adjective you might want to give it. It's still going to be baseball. It just hopefully batting averages are going to be up a little bit. And that's good. But, it's not turning golf into football. I think would be kind of like the diametrically opposed things.
Yeah. Baseball is baseball.
Mm-hmm. And we like it that way. It's it's a marathon and not a sprint, and it's a chill thing to drink a beer too and hang out, and it doesn't have to be smash mouth way that other sports necessarily.
I think the thing is that baseball is searching for its 3-point line, which is that's what changed basketball. Once they added a 3-point line, basketball became much more explosive, much more high scoring, much more exciting. I don't think that. First of all, I don't know if there is an equivalent to baseball, and if there was, I don't know if baseball is bold enough to seek it out. Because that was a super bold change that the NBA made, half a century ago. But when they did, it, totally changed the sport for the better. And I think that baseball is just searching for that, and they're not going to find it.
I wonder if some of that could be the distance from the mound to home plate. But I also worry when I make a suggestion like that it could include injuries to pitchers because it's such a fundamental change to creatures of habit. We talked about just how the ball substances and the weight of the baseball and the tackiness and all this stuff was a big deal to players who were frankly concerned about getting injured last year when we took away the tack, and that seems to have been overblown in hindsight to some degree or another, but it's a consideration. But I think we should talk about the Mariners specifically. And the Mariners have had an interesting week, and there's been a lot of opinions about it. And I was really fortunate to do the Lookout Landing podcast yesterday afternoon and talk a little bit about this. But I wanted to kick it over to Mikey first because he wrote a really great article on Suarez, who is one of the two new acquisitions. And I'm just gonna let Mikey talk because I liked the article a lot, loved it, and I think he covered a lot of the stuff, frankly, that I mentioned on the podcast anyway. So he stole all my salient points before I got to make them, naturally. So Mikey, tell us about Suarez.
So let's see. I have long been a fan of Suarez, in part because back in the day, I found it really interesting that and 2018 was really his coming out party. In 2019, he started pulling the ball 50% of the time, which I found really fascinating. Because pulling the ball is a way that you can create really easy power, really like synthetic power. And he fell off after 2019, and in 2020, it came out that in between 2019 and 2020, not sure what he was doing in the swimming pool, but he was swimming and he hurt
I
himself,
also saw that.
hurt a shoulder, and has just not been the same since. And his hard hit numbers, so on Fangraphs, his hard percentage fell off. I don't even know in terms of like some metrics will say, yeah, he's not hitting the ball as hard, and some will say he's hitting it a little harder. So it's depending on what you're looking at, but essentially, I kind of went in and I had thoughts about what I thought was going on before, just because I've always found him to be really interesting and I've always thought he was good. But the first thing that I kind of pointed out was that his BABIP dropped almost 100 points, which is really significant. And it's not like that happened over, a month to month kind of thing. It was like 2019, it was 312. The next 2 years, or, year and a half, because 2020 was shortened, it was 221, which is really fucking low. That's like,
It's quite bad.
Yeah. So with that, his dynamic hard hit percentage did go up a couple points, but it's marginal. It's insignificant, I think. With that, his percentage of poorly hit balls went up from 56% to 65, so about 9 points. And then his standard deviation of launch angle, it went up, which is a bad thing, by almost 2 degrees. And what that means, what point I kind of made, is that so a lower standard deviation of launch angle or launch angle tightness means that essentially you're hitting the ball really consistently. And the player to think about is another red, and Joey Votto. He has, maybe the best barrel control in baseball. Amazing BABIP, amazing launch angle tightness. And that got worse for Suarez. And, it seems like it's an injury thing. But, he already had an extreme fly ball, rate. And then in the past 2 years, it got even more extreme to the point where it's higher than Joey Votto's. Like, it's in the 94th percentile in all of MLB. So basically what's happening is that he's hitting a higher percentage of, like, he's still hitting the ball at about the same rate. Like, when you think about like a dynamically hard hit ball, he's still hitting about the same. But what's happening is that for the rest of the percentage, the rest that are not dynamically hit hard, a higher percentage of those are getting hit weaker. And generally speaking, those are balls that are getting hit weakly in the air as like kind of lazy fly balls. So I think Alex Chamberlain in his article, and I noticed this after I published, But he did a little bit of trigonometry and said he thinks that his vertical bat angle is about 7 degrees steeper than it was before. That's a really, really big difference. And usually it's a good thing to steepen your VBA, but I think he's probably done it too much. And if you think about it, if you're steepening that bat angle, he's probably getting under the ball more, which is why he's hitting. Well, he's not probably. He is getting under the ball more because he's hitting a lot of, those fly balls. And they're non-competitive fly balls, a lot of them. So, yeah. I mean, in terms of his like poorly hit ball percentage, like poor percentage, which feels weird to say, he's in the 27th percentile in the league. That's below JP Crawford, who does not hit the ball hard. I don't know if anyone needed to hear that, but he does not. So there's a relationship between BABIP and launch angle tightness. So I think what we need to see from Suarez is that he does, tighten up that SDLA, that standard deviation of launch angle. And he can probably do that by fixing his bat path, which is easier said than done. But like he's gotten under the ball about 5% more than in 2019, and his sweet spot has gone down by about 7%. So he's basically just not hitting balls at optimal angles. He's still hitting the ball hard regardless, but because he's a strong hitter. But he's essentially just like a really, really unoptimized version of himself. I think is the best way to put it. So I'm a really big fan of Suarez. I mean, not only like do I think he can be really good, but he can also like play an average third base. He can play shortstop, although like very badly. And he's just like a fun player off the field. I don't know if y'all saw his video.
Go on.
Good vibes only.
Yeah,
that's all I had to say.
He's a great guy, it seems like. And the fact that Reds fans were so sad to see both him and Jesse Winker go, I think it's like says that in spades that those are guys that are worth rooting for. Like I didn't see a single tear shed for Jake Fraley going to Cincinnati.
There were no tears to shed for Jake Fraley, unfortunately.
Yeah.
No.
But yeah, I mean, I've liked Eugenio Suarez for a long time. Infamously in my Dynasty Baseball League, I traded Corbin Burns for him 2 off seasons ago. So I was very big on him, and at this point, I've kind of been like tied to that wagon. And thankfully the Mariners will not need him to play shortstop, and I think that that kind of defensive change, players can say all they want, and I think. Didn't Andrew Vaughn say this last year? They moved him to left field, like a separation of church and state, basically. Like he's going to separate his brain when he's in the field. If he screws up in the field, it's he's going to be able to not carry that over into the batting box. I don't think that's possible.
I mean, Trey Turner talked about just yesterday moving to second and how it felt like he was like playing with his left hand. It was just wrong.
Yeah.
So.
Famously, church and state are always separated.
This is true.
But I think Eugenio Suarez will be happier at third base. The Mariners kind of did this themselves, over a decade ago when they moved Sean Figgins to third, and he, hit the tank. So I'm hoping that Perry Hill will get some magic working on Suarez. He's going to rediscover his love of third base and never have to play a game of shortstop again in his life because JP Crawford is there and Dylan Moore will be on the roster, no doubt. So I think that Suarez could be like, I think, Mikey said this in his article, like Seager-like production. And if that's the case, then I think that's great. That's a solid bat, maybe not an all-star. The upside is there for him to rediscover what he had in his 2018, 2019 seasons, but we don't have to expect it. And he sets and I know the Mariners probably aren't thinking too hard about this, but he sets up a timeline pretty well for like Noelvi Marte eventually rising to that spot. because in a couple of years, Marte will be ready to take over at third, and then Suarez probably moves over to the DH spot at that point. So I think that timeline works out pretty well, and I think maybe that's why the Mariners were resistant to go, splash on like a Chris Bryant, because how's Chris Bryant going to feel about moving off third base in 2 years? Maybe not so great. I mean, although he did play some left field, but the Mariners have their, a lot going on there too. But, I think the Winker side of it is interesting to me because the more I look at him, the more I just think Seth Smith, and that's the pessimistic side of me that says that, because Seth Smith was like very unsexy in a way that I think Winker could be. Winker is
Seth Smith has dad energy.
Yeah, Winker's a more exciting person than Seth Smith, but as a baseball player, there's a lot of similarities. They both crush righties, but they have deficiencies against left-handers. In his career, Winker has a 65 WRC plus against lefties and a 150 WRC plus against righties. So that's, if the Mariners are trying to tout this whole like, oh, you guys want a big free agent signing, and this is basically like getting a big free agent signing, I don't really know if that's true because Winker probably shouldn't be playing every day. He should probably be playing a strong side platoon, which is fine. And he was an all-star last year doing that same thing. But I think that expecting a multi-time all-star for him in Seattle is, I think, overly optimistic. I think he's going to be a very strong platoon player who is probably, against right-handers, maybe our best hitter, maybe our second or third best hitter, and against lefties, maybe he plays occasionally, but he really should sit for like Kyle Lewis. And I know that we don't like Keith Law, but Keith Law did say something that I thought made a lot of sense, which is that the Mariners could platoon Lewis and Winker in left field.
I think they will to some degree.
I think that will make a ton of sense because you want Lewis to ease his way in. And, playing the weak side of a platoon works out that way. And maybe if you want Lewis to be a little bit more than part-time, he DHs against righties sometimes. And that works out pretty well because, you get him in left field when they're against left-handers, and then you get him at DH a week, a game or two a week against righties. And that's pretty much like a, 4 or 5 games a week kind of guy. I think that works out pretty well for Lewis, and it works out well for Winker. And it makes that left field spot potentially, if everyone stays healthy and productive, which never happens, but it makes that spot very good for the Mariners, which was their weakest spot in the lineup before. So overall, I think this is a great deal for the Mariners. They gave up 2 guys who were not going to be a part of their future, in Jake Fraley and Justin Dunn. I think Dunn had the potential to be like a strong reliever, but the Mariners don't have need for that right now. And they gave up Brandon Williamson, which hurts. But if you're giving up a pitching prospect for 2 starting bats in a potential playoff lineup, I think that's a good trade-off to make. We don't know what that player to be named later is going to be, but there's reason to believe it's going to be like a lottery ticket teenager or just recently not teenager, like a Milcar Perez or a George Feliz or a Gabriel Gonzalez, one of those guys that's like low minors. And I still think that that's a fair thing to give up for those 2 pieces. The one thing, and this has been a point of discussion, is Dipoto saying that this is the lineup at this point. And I think that was what took everybody from like Happy Town, like this is the greatest move the Mariners have ever made, to, oh my God, this offseason sucked. And I think that both of those reactions were a little bit too extreme in both directions. I think the move was very good, but my excitement when I saw that move was I was like, oh, here they are about to make a sequence of moves that will push them into that playoff window. So when he made that one move and then said we're done, it felt like the party ended early. It felt like you got to this really great party and then they, kicked everyone out an hour in. When you were expecting that the Mariners were going to go out there and supplement this move with a couple other moves. And it's still possible they could. People have pointed out that maybe Dipoto was saying this as a way to kind of signal to Boris or whoever is the agent for whatever free agent he wants to sign, saying like, we don't need you guys. And that it's possible the Mariners still could go out and sign Bryant or Story. But the question then becomes, and people have raised this question, where would those guys play? And I said this to you, Evan, before the podcast started, but I think Story makes a lot more sense now to Seattle than Bryant does. Because what you could do is you put Story at second and you move Adam Frazier to the Dylan Moore utility spot. And that's Pretty
Mhm.
simple. It gets trickier if you try to sign Bryant because he's a third baseman and left fielder, and now you just acquired a third baseman and a left fielder. So I don't think that that's really a fit anymore. But I am just hoping that one day, one of these days, I'll see a Jeff Passan notification that says the Mariners agreed to a deal with Trevor Story, and we're all like, "Oh my god, it happened anyway." But I just don't think that's
Mhm.
going to happen. And at this point, I'm even wondering what is realistic for them to get on the starting pitching market because there's
Yeah.
only, and I talked about this, I think, with you guys in the Slack yesterday. There aren't that many pitchers out there that the Mariners can trade for that fits the criteria of what Dipoto wants. He wants
Mhm.
a solid
Yeah.
top of the rotation guy he can get in a trade. And there's probably, there's the A's guys, there's the Marlins guys, maybe. If the Marlins think that they're not winning now, there's maybe John Means, but that's going to be expensive. There's Herman Marquez, but the Rockies don't know what the heck they're doing, and they think they're trying to win now. And all those guys are going to be expensive. So, like, basically, your options are the A's: Sean Manaea, Frankie Montas. And I think, like I said, I think the Marlins are trying to win, and if we're talking like top of the rotation guys, I think only two Marlins players fit that bill, and that's Sandy Alcantara and Pablo Lopez. And I think both of those guys would be hella expensive.
I agree. I mean, no, yeah, I think I tend to agree. I love the rotation. I mean, it's Alcantara, Trevor Rogers, Pablo, Eliezer Hernandez, Jesus Luzardo, and Sixto
Sixto,
Sanchez.
yeah.
It's pretty good. And like I liked Zach Thompson and I liked Gallen. It's wild. I don't know how they do this, but
And they had
uh,
Paddock too, right?
yeah, they've had a lot. They've had like a lot of guys. It's kind of wild. Um, but yeah, I mean, we always knew or thought that the acquisition on the pitching side was going to come via trade. So I still think that's going to happen. And we also know that that's how Dipoto likes to work. He doesn't like signing free agents. He likes trading for players. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
He certainly
Maybe
hasn't had success at signing players in any case. It doesn't seem like anyone wants to take his money.
I think the
maybe
frustrating thing
it's
is
worth looking at bloated contracts. I don't think anyone's really been doing that lately.
I think the frustrating thing is why didn't Dipoto just get Suarez and Luis Castillo or Tyler Mahle and then sign Seiya Suzuki? Because now we have a bunch of money left over, and no, because we have a bunch of money left over, and there's no starting pitchers left to spend that money on. So if you're gonna spend money, it's gonna
Mhm.
be on a bat, and now the question is where do you put that bat? And they're sitting at just over 100 million on payroll when we thought they'd come in at 130, 140. So they still have like a big contract to sign in theory that they could sign. But it doesn't seem like they're going to now, which is frustrating to just see them pocket that money after we were promised a huge offseason.
Yeah, and one thing that I was thinking about when you guys are talking about the Marlins in particular as a trade partner is they're in kind of a weird spot with Jeter seemingly not being forced out but quitting, kind of having a title revocation or something to that effect because he was at odds with the Marlins brass over spending money on the team. But also them having Kim Ng as their GM, so they're this weird mix of like theoretically being super cheap and maybe wanting to cut bait with some potentially more expensive players, but also having one of the smarter minds in baseball running the operation. So I don't trust them to dump anything or give us, like a really great deal on anyone. So I'm a little hesitant to trade with the Marlins in any case. But I wanted to pitch it over to you, Mikey. Talk about. I know you're doing another article on Winker, and he's an interesting case. He's his recent performance has been all-star caliber, as has been noted in a lot of places. He is kind of a candidate to be a platoon situation. Obviously, the defense isn't, starting caliber. He's more of a, an alternate or a left fielder. But he is inarguably the best or second best hitter on the Mariners lineup. Maybe Mitch Haniger has a couple of months where he's a lot better, but Mitch has kind of streaky performance. So we really have added it seems like the second best bat to this lineup potentially. What do you think of Winker, and kind of how are you feeling about the offense in general if this is all that they do and this is what they roll with?
Yeah, I kind of echo Durr's sentiment that it would be a bummer. Like I would love to see someone that you just slot into the two hole like a Trout, and it doesn't have to be Trout, but just like a star hitter,
Yeah.
and that's obviously not happening right now. Um, I don't know. I think that their offense is maybe a little underrated, and I'm interested to see what comes next, because maybe the way that they supplement on, and I don't think this is going to happen, but I think like maybe the way that they supplement is, by adding a more defensively inclined center fielder that adds value on the hitting side, not through hitting or through the lineup, but through your batters. They still have room to add. I mean, part of me thinks that they're posturing. Like right now, roster resource has Abe Toro DHing in the 9 hole.
Which honestly, he needs at bats. I think he could become a regular player, and as is right now, he's kind of screwed. And if they sign Story, he's really screwed.
Yeah.
I think if you're doing a good job of it, I think if you added Story or Bryant right now, you could very, very easily move Frazier and Toro around and get everyone regular at bats.
Yeah.
Because Haniger's going to need some downtime. Kelnick's playing a lot of center field. Like Kyle Lewis is Kyle Lewis. There's a lot of guys. Like the Mariners have a team that a lot of guys are going to need. Ty France gets gets hit every fucking game. So,
Right.
I think it is a good lineup as is, but man, there's such an easy route for Frazier to not be the hitter that he was, and then Kelnick to not even be an average hitter, JP Crawford to not be great, Tom Murphy to suck, Toro to like. It's such a high variance lineup, and the ceiling's not that high.
I think my biggest problem with these acquisitions being is Jerry's posturing this as we've just acquired 4 All-Stars. Yes, but I think all 4 of those players have seen their best career year at this point.
I would agree with that as well.
I think last year is the best year Frazier's ever going to have. I think last year's definitely the best year Robbie Ray is ever going to have. I think last year might be Winker's best year. And I think, Suarez's best year was 2018, 2019. I don't think those guys are going to get back to the production they were at in those particular years, which is why I think it's kind of like feeding its horseshit to say that, we just acquired 4 All-Stars, because you're telling everybody like these guys are going to make All-Star teams. And I posed this question to the Slack today, but like, do you think that Winker or Suarez will make an All-Star team or win a regular season award as a Mariner? And I don't think they will. Like, I think they'll both be very good players. I just don't think they're that caliber player the Mariners need. They're not a diamond level the show baseball card, that the Mariners are looking for. But then again, I don't know if Story is either. But I think that to sell them to sell us on we just acquired a bunch of stars is not truthful in that sense.
I don't really care if they make All-Star games, though.
Sure,
yeah,
but
it's a superfluous metric. We mentioned on the Lookout Landing pod that our All-Star last year was Kikuchi. So if we had decided Kikuchi, would we have added 5 All-Stars? Like, it's just a technicality, really. But yeah, I agree with the variance thing you said in your approach. I would say too that you said Abe Toro is slated to be the DH. I have a theory, which is that Kyle Lewis is healthy enough to play, and instead of sending him to AAA, they DH him for the first 2-3 weeks. I think that makes a ton of sense, even though Jerry kind of caveated that they may start him in the minor leagues. I think Evan White is for sure going to start in the minor leagues. So they do have some young players who are who, like you said, need at bats, but are not in line for them necessarily directly out of spring training. And that's okay because we have, depth. That's what depth is for, in case somebody gets injured and, or doesn't play very well. If, Tom Murphy hits .76 again for a month or whatever, we can throw Torrens in there and swap some stuff up. But yeah, I agree that there are spots on this roster and in this lineup constructed currently that could be black holes under bad circumstances. Yeah.
Also, I mean, so there's that Haniger, France, Kelnick, Toro. Really, like Raleigh, Torrens, Trammell, White, they could all have breakout years. So there is that.
Yeah.
But
Julio Soto. I mean, we don't
totally forgot about him.
Julio has the highest projection in a couple of systems for WAR for the Mariners players. He has I want to say Ty France was at 3.1 and he was at 3.3. So he's already projected to actually be the Mariners' best player by some metrics, which I think is generous. I honestly, I don't think he's going to have that kind of a season, but it's just a representation of how much the general statistics seem to buy into his performance in the minor league so far.
I think people are really sleeping on Trammell, as you just said, Mikey. Everyone has totally forgotten about him existing. He was a former top prospect who's only had a half season of struggling.
Yeah, and the thing for me is all of these guys, I guess, so on the other side of that, all of these good teams, and I've said this plenty of times, good teams don't just hand out, at bats to Abe Toro. You have to earn them. Maybe you get a handful, 100, 200 plate appearances, but in general, you're not going into a season being Abraham Toro is gonna get 100 or 450 plate appearances. So I feel like it would be a good thing if Toro got pushed to the bench. And I don't, as I've said again many times, I don't think you count on Kyle Lewis.
No, but
I think we already heard that they don't. The first things we've heard out of spring training are we haven't seen him this entire time, and he's probably not ready. So I think they agree with that. They're not going to.
What happens if you stop here? And I will say the Padres, they already had Ha-Seong Kim and Jurickson Profar and Jake Cronenworth, and then they went out and got Adam Frazier. So that's the prime example of you just acquire good players and you figure it out. But the last thing I want is for them to just sit on their hands and be okay, we're done, and not get someone like Story or even a lesser example of that, and then end up playing Jack Mayfield for 30 games because we have injuries. Because that's going to happen. Is one of these, 2 or 3 of these guys are going to get hurt. France is going to land on the IL. Haniger might hit the IL again, and that's going to really fucking suck when those are our best hitters. And now we're, sitting around and watching Dylan Moore play left field every night.
Mm-hmm. But Mikey is right in that. What's so interesting about our team as young as ours is you are expecting breakouts or at the very least improved performance from at least some of these guys. We're figuring Jared's going to have a better year. We're figuring even if we're not counting on Kyle Lewis, maybe he gets in 200 pretty decent at bats. Maybe Trammell gets in 200 pretty decent at bats. Maybe we just don't have to play Jack Mayfield or, whatever other avatar we would pull out of the ether for those particular
Donovan Walton.
I couldn't believe yeah, I mean, who had 69 plate appearances, so good for Donnie. But when I was looking through the list of hitters who took at bats for the Mariners last year, I couldn't Brandon Bishop apparently was on the Mariners last year and played 2 games. I have zero memory of this. I do remember, as I said, Jake Bowers. I remember that very vividly. All 200 plate appearances of Jake Bowers.
How many did he get?
So you're hoping that 202. So in a perfect world, Winker and Torrens and Evan White are taking those at bats realistically, but you never know. We never know, and some scrub will come out of somewhere to play for this team at some point. So we're always braced for that.
We're gonna have our Jose Marmolejos somewhere.
I'm so happy he's living his best life in Japan.
Dude, he's gonna
good
rake
for him.
Yeah,
he's gonna be
his bat speed numbers are so good. So good.
he's like the perfect archetype to be an absolute sensation in Japan. The exact skill set. So that's tight. I think
call him
Vogelback
God.
should go to Japan too. Vogelback might tear it up in Japan.
I wouldn't mind that, so I could stop hearing about him.
Let's talk about the AL West because we wanted to examine some of our competition. A couple different projection systems have come out. Baseball Prospectus in particular has the Mariners placing third in the AL West, pretty middle of the pack, right around 500, with the Angels and Houston out in front of us. What do you guys think of some of the projections you've seen so far? Are they, too high, too low on the Mariners? And what are they missing? Because I felt like the projections were missing they're always missing context. They're just naked numbers. But I felt like understanding what we're looking at with the Mariners in particular is its own discussion relative to the rest of the AL West.
What is the Fangraphs playoff odds? 29% on Seattle or something? I think that's a little bit low. I would put them more at like a 40. Especially with 12 teams in the playoffs. I think that the projection systems continue to just rave about the Angels, but half of me is I'll believe it when I see it, but I also don't know if Trout can like stay healthy. And I don't know if Ohtani can stay healthy, so I don't really know if I trust the Angels. And they're expecting a lot from Noah Syndergaard, and they're expecting a lot from a lot of these players, Anthony Rendon. These are all guys who've had injury histories, and they're expecting those guys to be like stars for this team. So I don't see how the Mariners are behind them, but I also see how they could be like near them. I think maybe what they're missing is they're all expecting massive regression from the bullpen, which I don't know if that's fair because the Mariners always seem to pop up with like 2 or 3 mystery like superstar bullpen relievers. So even if a couple of them flame out, I feel like they'll just like replace them with like new Paul Sewalds and Drew Steckenriders.
There's only one Paul Sewald.
Sorry, with new Drew Steckenriders and Casey Sappho.
Thank you.
Maybe Johan has a breakout year.
There you go. Yeah,
I've said that for the record.
I think the bullpen is stacked. I think maybe because we're fans of the Mariners, we are baking in a lot of breakouts that we maybe shouldn't be.
Naturally.
But
to be fair, the team is young and does have actually highly regarded prospects. This is not a Ryan Healy situation where we're looking at it side-eyed like, no, he's definitely like gonna pin. It isn't like that.
Oh,
like
Ryan
he's
Healy.
Yeah, he was our starting third baseman for 3 seasons. And people were serious about him. Basically, yeah.
I mean, he was at first for a while. He wasn't third for all that time. But
fuck.
We had Kyle Seager for those
years. He played
a
lot of third. Yeah, well, he covered for the Kyle Seager injury in particular, right? For a couple seasons. None of it was good.
I need to take a shower. That's so bad.
See, Jerry will make a deal with the A's for Ryan Healy, but not for Sean Manai.
Yeah, God. In fairness, they only gave up Emilio Pagan. So,
who had a great season after that, but I think got injured and kind of washed out. I love
him. Bad home run problem. Very bad home run problem.
Took us off
Did we talk about Winker?
Yeah, we did.
For reals? I don't remember.
You can talk more about Winker if you want to talk about Winker. I figured you want to preview your article.
Yeah. Did I? I didn't do that, right?
I mean, you can do whatever you got to do, man. Do whatever you got to do.
I don't think I fucking did it. So I'll talk about him real quick. Okay, so first off, I don't think he's ever played even 120 games. So I think Durs is right in that he is, the strong side of whatever platoon is to come. And I don't know. I mean, I think Julio should help. Unless it's Kyle Lewis, I don't know who that is. So I feel like the Mariners.
Justin Ruggiano.
I loved that signing or that trade for the record. But so basically what I wrote about him is in a similar way. I don't know if I talked about this. I talked about like synthetic power, right?
No.
I did. I definitely did. Sorry.
You talked about synthetic power as it related to Suarez in particular, with the pull side stuff, but not about it as it relates to Winker.
Cool.
I apologize about this on the Lookout Landing pod. I'm going to call him Winkler more than once. It's going to happen. My brain goes to say it every time I say Winker. It thinks Winkler, and
At least
just
there's a
sorry
Dan
about
Winkler that you can like blame. Yo, this cat is going
Henry
ape shit
Winkler.
right now.
No,
Oh, that's you. Well, you're old, man. So so yeah, he has been very good, but I mean, he's pretty much hit since 2017, and yet preface, this is going to be really nice, and yet he only has a career 6.9 WAR. So that's not like, it's basically been the past 2 seasons, which is impressive in a shortened 2020 season, that he's been, really good. But what's interesting to me is that the Mariners, Divish tweeted, Winker, man, you're gonna make me call him Winkler. Winker will play left field versus righties and some lefties because the M's believe he has the ability to hit lefty pitching. I have heard that so many goddamn times. I've heard that so many goddamn times from the Mariners. I don't even remember what hitters, but they always say that they think a lefty has the ability to hit against lefties, and he never fucking does. So I am calling them on their shit. But I do kind of see an avenue for him improving. And again, I am very, is it bearish? Bearish, right?
Bullish is good, bearish is bad.
I am very bearish. So, keep in mind he's only ever had 306 plate appearances against lefties. His xWOBA is 318 against lefties, which is very good. Like for, a left-hander against lefties, that's league average, like in a vacuum. His WOBA is 276. That's really fucking low compared to his xWOBA. Whereas against righties and like 1,200 plate appearances, his WOBA is 405, his xWOBA is 385. So, kids, what what if we learned here is that the reason why he is so good is he's created a lot of synthetic power by pulling the ball a ton against righties. So, if you look at his hard hit percentage, I think in the percentile, he's like 87th percentile. He's really good. But when you look at his dynamic hard hit percentage and you fold in spray angle, so whether or not he's pulling it or going oppo, whatever, he's in the 50th percentile. So in terms of like raw power, he's very average, but he just does an amazing job of optimizing his pull side. But he only does that against righties. Against lefties, he's really fucking bad at it. I think he goes opposite. I haven't finished. Like, I'm just getting to the end of the article where I'm talking about this. I think he just hits a lot of. So, like, in terms of exit velo and launch angle, like when StatCast spits out an xWOBA value, it's just looking at those two values. It doesn't look at spray angle, which it should. If it did, I guarantee you his xWOBA would fall by like 20 or 30 points. So essentially, he is just slicing the ball and going oppo a lot. And when you do that, the ball doesn't fly as far. So I think he could, as against lefties, I think he could stand to gain by pulling the ball more. I don't know how you do that, but he could very well become more of an average left-handed hitter against lefties rather than someone with a 65 career WRC plus against lefties, which is very bad. So that's what I got to say about Winker. I don't know if I needed to, but I think it's good information.
No, it's good. So is that going in your, I guess it's going to be 40 and 25, but 40 and 40 piece?
Yeah, like all that information. Yeah, will be within more granular, obviously, but yeah, and probably a couple other things because I haven't buttoned it up, but I'll get it finished up tonight and it'll be out tomorrow.
Quick sidebar, but did you want to mention your little promotion, the big news?
Oh, like my freelance thing?
Yeah, that's pretty cool, right? I mean, you don't have, if you don't want to, you don't have to, but I figured it'd be cool.
No, it's not official. Like it's not, in general, I'm waiting until I release an article to tell everyone, but might as well tell our devoted listeners, I am now going to be freelancing, not only at Baseball Prospectus, but also at 538, which, you know, they're more known for politics, but they also do sports. And I'm super excited about it. So, you know, I've got a lot on my plate in terms of this and Lookout Landing and 538 and Baseball Prospectus, but and counseling in school. But yeah, man. But yeah, it's exciting. So I just pitched a couple ideas that got sort of turned down. So we'll see if I can come up with something that's a little more clickbaity, or just, you know, that it's a weird population because it's like the masses, but like from an analytical perspective.
Well, yeah, it's the masses as it pertains to stat nerds, the stat nerd masses.
Yeah, exactly. So I got to come up with a topic, but hopefully by like next week.
I feel like, and this is kind of a comment I can only make because I'm very familiar with 538 and their actual journalism. Like, I haven't honestly read a 538 article in like a couple months, and I've stopped listening to the podcast quite a bit after, like, frankly, the 2020 election, because like I just needed to chill. I think a lot of people did. I think their traffic was way up during that period, but then like I couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
To some degree. I wasn't gonna give you a hard time about being Nate Silver's new BFF.
Hey, listen, I no comment.
We won't push you on that. I think Nate Silver is a big dork, and so I don't take anything he says personally because he's just a flaming dork. But what I would say is that their articles have kind of like a very specific narrative framing that is a really natural fit for the way you write your articles. And that's also a pretty natural fit for Lookout Landing, frankly. Lookout Landing has a kind of like tongue-in-cheek vibe to a lot of the writing and just like the material that gets posted that you work with really well. But you also weave a story, even like in the titles of your articles, you know, like such and such as little Ty France in them. Like you're kind of, you pick a framing and stick to the framing and have all your analytics kind of lined up in the framework. And not everything in sports writing is like that. And I think you're going to do really well because you fit the format that people are already expecting very capably. And so I think you're going to do great. I think that's cool. My understanding was you said it's temporary, but it's still awesome, dude. Like 538 is very official. You're an insider.
That is technically ESPN, Mikey.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Does that make you higher than Joe on the Baseball Prospectus hierarchy? Like, I don't know, man.
Man,
do you have more clout than Joe Doyle?
I don't know. Once people hear Joe's news, I don't
Traitor!
think so. Yeah. But
so angry.
Yeah, thanks, man. I do think it's a good fit, and it's, you know, it's once or twice a month, I think, generally speaking. So yeah, I'm really excited to kind of get started with that. And, you know, once I graduate, I'm gonna have so much more time to do all this. It's so exciting. It's 5 more
you graduate
months.
this year,
August.
Okay, so yeah, word.
Yeah.
I was thinking we should have Joe on our next pod because he'll be officially unable to be friends with us anymore at a certain point.
We really should.
He's not going to be on the minor league pod anymore for Lookout Landing either. They're going to have to get one of the new writers on there.
They're going to have to get me.
Dude.
Hi, sweet boy.
Pitch it.
Bye. Sorry, I was talking to my cat again, if you're just listening.
Well, Durs already kind of gave us a little bit about the AL West. Mikey, do you, I believe this was your note, do you have anything on kind of like the Mariners and the competitive balance of the AL West or where they sit in it? Based on the projections in particular.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how much, Jesus fucking Christ, cat number one. I think it's interesting how much the projections like the Angels. I don't know. Wasn't Rendon out like the whole year?
Yes.
Yeah, Rendon's been pretty seriously injured for a while now. So
Noah Syndergaard also famously did not throw a pitch. Well, no, he threw like a pitch last year.
Wasn't it like 3 innings, something like that?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And Trout's going to be playing center field, which...
No, he's playing left field now. Remember, they didn't tell him until they told the media.
Wait. Is he actually playing left?
Oh, okay, so what happened was basically, who's the manager now?
Madden?
Is it still Madden? Okay, Madden
Mhm.
told the media they
Yeah.
wanted to move Trout to left field, but that they hadn't talked to Trout about that yet. Then someone went up to Trout and he's like, "What? I mean, I don't know." And the next day, Trout like came back with a more succinct answer, which is like, "I don't want to move to left field. I want to play center." So it's
Damn.
unclear what he's going to be doing.
Well, God, idiots.
The Mets
Yeah.
of the West.
Yeah, so I think like when it's all said and done, I think that the Rangers will be a much more formidable team than they are now because their pitching is dog shit. I think is a scientific term. And yeah, I don't think the Angels are as good as the projections would lead us to believe. I just like really think the Mariners need to do something because they're, in terms of just like projected WAR, they're lagging behind the Angels by 5 wins. I think they could pretty easily address some of that by starting pitching, which they're probably going to do, but maybe not. Maybe that doesn't happen if they get Tyler Anderson as opposed to, oh boy, not Sonny Gray anymore, Luis Castillo. So yeah, and we talked about the free agent market is real thin, boys. Chad Cole's even gone.
I kind
So
of wonder if the Mariners could like go and get Manaea and Laureano or something.
you think the A's would do that?
The A's don't give a shit. They want to give away players that are going to cost them money, and Laureano's about to cost
I
them
don't
some
know.
money.
They're gonna want Noelvi. That's the thing, is any player of like real impact, the conversation starts with Noelvi. If Julio and Kirby and Kelnick are obviously off the table, who else are you going to talk about?
That's why
the
you
Mariners
just back up a truckload of money to one of these infielders. But anyway, we've gotten past that.
would have been cool. Would have been real cool.
Oh,
It's okay.
You know what might happen? I think Steven Souza is a huge platoon bat. Like I'm pretty sure. I know. I'm pretty sure he can't hit righties. I have to look at this, but that might be what happens if they
Please
go in
don't
and
let
think
that
that
be the
he can.
solution.
I mean, yeah,
He's barely played in years and also been terrible. So I feel like he is.
Yeah,
playing
he's played less than 30
at
games
best.
since 2018.
But has he hit? Has he hit though?
No, he's had a 50.
No,
against lefties though.
Well, let's check. Last year he had a 51 WRC plus, and the year before he had a 59 WRC plus. But let's check those splits for Mikey.
I'm pretty sure he's hit. I bet he's hit lefties
versus lefties in his career. A 108 WRC plus.
All right, I'm wrong. Sort of. He doesn't really have much of a split. Oh boy, I don't know.
What's Manuel Margot doing right now?
What is he doing right now? Does anyone know? Does Manuel Margot know what he's doing right now?
Presumably.
We really should be getting a center fielder. I don't fucking know. But yeah, so I don't know. I think that the M's are in decent shape. I think they need to make one more addition on in terms of a bat, and it doesn't have to be like a good batting bat. It can be a good fielder, which also hard to come by. But I think they need to make a legitimate, what Pete Carroll would call a legit addition on in the starting rotation, and at least a marginal improvement in terms of offense. And I think it's going to happen. I think Dipoto is kind of posturing to an extent to kind of try and drive down the price, which probably isn't even much of a thing.
Let's get both of you guys on the record here. Before opening day, will the Mariners acquire what people would classify as an impact bat? Yes or no?
Okay, so the only options for that really are Bryant, Story, and Correa, right?
Or
Like
Suzuki,
realistically.
or a trade?
Okay.
Like, I would classify a Laureano as an impact bat, I think. So I'm thinking
I'm gonna
like
say they'd
three,
like to, but they don't.
like 3 wins or more, basically.
I think that people would not consider him an impact bat, even though I think you're probably right. So let's see. Let me look at unsigned hitter.
My official vote for Durs is no.
Okay.
For the record,
Watch them get
question,
Correa. Watch them get Correa.
I would
be so pumped.
I would be pretty hyped.
That'd be so cool. That'd be incredible.
And what would you
Even
do,
if he
move him to
costs like
second?
350 million, we'd just pay him. It's
What do you
fine.
do?
It's on my money.
Do you move him to second base? It's not third. I don't even think it makes sense anymore.
You just have no one at second base. You just don't play it. 2 DHs, no second baseman. I don't know.
Hey, we can make it work.
You know, as we're doing this, I was reading through some of the comments on the Lookout Landing pod, because nobody ever comments on the Lookout Landing pods. They only comment when they want to like hardcore disagree with what we said. And one of the things people are saying is that we're negative about this trade in particular and kind of minimizing how much of a win it is. I think now that I've had some time to sit with it and my emotions aren't oscillating quite so much as I read more and more about said players live, is that I like the Mariners offseason and what they've done with Ray, with Frazier, with the whole 9 yards in context altogether better than I necessarily like anything individually, maybe. And I would also say that the team is unquestionably better. However, they went about it in ways that I may not have preferred. And yeah, that's in a nutshell. That's it. What would you guys say to that? What's your opinion?
I think they oversold how the offseason was going to go. I don't think this is like Firefest level disaster, but like they did promise us like basically a huge party this offseason. And I think we got like a decent sized party, but it wasn't like we did not get like the whole extravaganza. I think basically a lot of us are looking at what the Rangers did at first with Semien and Seager, and we're all like, oh wow, the Mariners could do that. Like that, this could be like the Mariners do that kind of thing. And during the lockout, Ryan Divish posted that article that said don't be surprised if the Mariners sign 2 of Bryant, Story, and Suzuki. Like, I think that got everybody pretty excited. And now the Mariners are going to probably get none of them. Like, I don't know. I think we were sold on big dreams, and like, I think that's coloring where we're perceiving this offseason.
First is that they could add, a big addition, like a big contract via trade. And then there's also that it might end up being a good idea that they don't sign anyone right now. They don't have to spend that. Like, they shouldn't spend for the sake of spending, especially if there is a reason why Dipoto is reaching these quote unquote dead ends. Someone that I actually think is pretty interesting is Tommy Pham. He's not signed. Right-handed. I don't know. He's kind of old now, but yeah, I don't know. I think that there are still, we know that the Mariners like to get pretty creative. I definitely think they oversold what was going to happen, because it really did sound like we were going to get one of the marquee, free agents. Dipoto nearly said so himself. But this could end up being an all right thing that they don't get one of the big guys, and they did. They didn't get one of the bats, but they got Robbie Ray. So,
what they've done too is, like you said, they've taken on expensive contracts with Suarez and Winker, and that's a good thing because that money is off the books in relatively short order. I want to say Winker is on the books for 2 more years after this, so it's like basically a 3-year deal for him. And I know Suarez is through 2025, so it's 3 years for him as well. That's a good spot for them to have their money invested, especially if they're going to wait it out and sign some of the prospects that are already here to longer deals. So they've left themselves they have spent some money, but they've got flexibility to kind of spend some more in the right places. But I think we'll wrap it up there for today. Do you guys have any other final thoughts? Or, I know the Mariners are actually going to be playing by the next time we get to pod. So that's pretty cool. And maybe we'll have a guest. We have a couple new writers at Lookout Landing. So maybe, maybe Shay wants to come back. I don't know. Who knows? We'll figure something out, right?
Well, I just spilled the beans on one of our new hires.
Today. Wow.
Shay
announced it.
What?
No,
yeah,
she announced it. Yeah.
She's already in there, right? Yeah.
Go ahead, Mikey. What were you saying?
Oh, I just said I heard Paul Sewald looked good today.
Paul Sewald looks good every day, for the record.
That's facts. Out of all the girls at school.
All right. Well, we'll wrap it there today. I'm Evan, and you can find me on Twitter at Evan James Audio. You can find Mikey on Twitter at Kuya Mikey. You can find Anders at Anders Jorstad. You can find the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get podcasts, wherever it is you stream. I'm also going to link it at the end of the video if you're watching on YouTube or Spotify. Additionally, please support the podcast on Patreon by going to patreon.com/neversunnyin Seattle. Again, there'll be links at the end. Thanks for listening. Go Mariners, and glad to have baseball back.